of Excellence, BHU Varanasi. This session will be chaired by Dr. Manasvi Chaube. And the topic of the RDLS is rheumatological manifestation in HIV patients. Dr. Manasvi Chaube is an associate professor, Department of General Medicine, Institute of Medical Sciences, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. She has done MBBS from MLB Medical College, Jhansi in 2010 and MD from SN Medical College, Agra in 2014. Her area of specialization is in internal medicine and rheumatology. She is running rheumatology OPD for last 5 years. She has done Euler online course for 2 years in rheumatology. She is also a member of SESUP at COE IMS BHU. I am going to hand over the mic Dr. Manasi ma'am to continue the session.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sandeep, for such a lovely introduction. So today we are going to discuss the rheumatological manifestation in the HIV patients. So as we all know, with the evolution of the treatment strategies and the availability of the newer drugs in HIV and better access to the healthcare, the life expectancy of the people living with HIV has increased. Now, these people are the lesser number of the patients of HIV are dying because of opportunistic infections and per se HIV or AIDS. The newer emerging disorders in HIV patients are now the musculoskeletal disorders and the cardiovascular diseases. Musculoskeletal disorders are common in HIV infection and can occur in any stage of the disease. It leads to the increased morbidity and it also impairs the quality of life. Now, when we talk about the rheumatological manifestation in HIV, it can be classified in two manners. Certain, so few of the rheumatological manifestations are unique in HIV. So they certain rheumatological infections you can may encounter in HIV, which you see in non-HIV patients also. And the third group is the diseases which stays in the remission in the advanced HIV patients and which presents or which exacerbates with the iris, development of iris in HIV patients. Now, the other way is that you divide the rheumatological manifestation in the three categories, either related to the bone and joint or the muscle disorder, or the third is ART related. So, first of all, we are going to see what are the rheumatological manifestations which are unique to HIV. So, it includes your diffuse infiltrative lymphocytosis syndrome, HIV associated arthritis, zidovudine associated myopathy, and the painful articular syndrome. Now, the diseases which you can see in HIV patients, but the predisposition is for HIV-associated reactive arthritis, seronegative spondyloarthropathy, which includes ankylosing spondylitis, reactive arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, and undifferentiated spondyloarthropathy and intrahepatic arthritis. Patient may have polymyositis, which is the most common inflammatory myositis which you get in HIV, but you may get dermatomyositis and inclusion body myositis also. Now, patients of HIV can have vasculitis. It either can be primary or secondary. Primary vasculitis may be PAN, that is polyarthritis nodosa, giant cell arthritis, Behçet syndrome. Behçet syndrome is basically your genital ulceration with uveitis and arthritis. Patient can have Henoch's colon purpura. They are more common in the children group. Granulomatosis with polyangiitis is a newer name for the Wegener syndrome. And you can have eosinophilic polyangiitis, that is your Churg-Strauss. Now, the patient can have fibromyalgia and infectious arthritis, maybe bacterial or fungal. Certain rheumatological manifestations are ameliorated by the HIV infection, but worsening or reappearing can occur with iris. So, these include rheumatoid arthritis and the systemic lupus erythematosus, that is SLE. Now, when we compare the previous studies which have been done, what we can see in this slide that the most common rheumatological manifestation in HIV patient is HIV arthralgia, followed by undifferentiated spondyloarthropathy and the HIV arthritis. Patient can have septic arthritis, bacterial or fungal. The patient can have pyomyositis, psoriatic arthropathy, reactive arthritis, and vasculitis. The incidence of DILS has now decreased because of early initiation of ART. Now coming to the HIV associated bone and the joint disease, the most common is the HIV associated arthralgia. Many of the HIV patient will have otherwise unexplained arthralgia. It might be a manifestation of seroconversion. The pathogenesis is still unclear but may involve cytokines or transient bone ischemia. It is usually self-limiting in course and there is no evidence of synovitis. Rarely progress to inflammatory joint disease. The most common site which is involved in HIV associated arthralgia is knees, but you can have the involvement of shoulders and elbow also. The treatment is symptomatic. You have to reassure your patients and you can try for the non-narcotic analgesics. Now, the second one is painful articular syndrome. It is also a self-limiting disorder, lasts usually less than resolves within 24 hours of onset. The patient will have severe bone and joint pain, especially lower extremities. The involvement will be in the asymmetric manner, and the patient's subjective complaint will be accompanied with a fewer objective clinical finding. It means that the patient will not have any tenderness, but the pain will be there. So, and it usually occurs in the later stages of HIV infection. Cause is unknown, and there is no evidence of synovitis, similar as in the case of arthralgia. The prevalence has now reduced with the initiation of ART, early initiation of ART, and the treatment is symptomatic. Now, the third is HIV associated arthritis. It is very important to know about this because it is usually confused with the rheumatoid arthritis and reactive arthritis. So, HIV associated arthritis can present in a asymmetrical oligoarthritis manner. It can present with a symmetrical polyarthritis or monoarthritis. Now, oligoarthritis is the most common prototype for the HIV associated arthritis. When I say oligoarthritis, it means the joint involvement is less than or equal to 4. If it is more than 5 or more than 5, then it is polyarthritis. So oligoarthritis predominantly occurs in the lower extremities and it has male preponderance. Polyarthritis mimic RA but usually non-erosive. Self-limiting course is there and lasts less than 6 weeks. So if a patient comes with the oligoarthritis knee involvement and the patient is male, but there is no signs of enthesitis, dactylitis, and no mucocutaneous involvement. It is most probably HIV-associated arthritis rather than reactive arthritis. Similar is in the case of polyarthritis. So if a patient comes with the multiple joint involvement, but the RA factor is negative and there is no evidence of erosions in the X-ray, then you will classify this patient in a HIV-associated polyarthritis prototype of HIV associated arthritis. Origin is unclear. HLA-B27 and rheumatoid factors are typically negative. No other known genetic factors have been seen, and there is absence of enthesopathies, that is enthesitis and mucocutaneous involvement, that is characteristic of reactive arthritis. Synovial fluid is sterile if you do the culture. Treatment is symptomatic. You can give NSAIDs. NSAID, among NSAID, you will prefer to give indomethacin because it has been shown that it decreases the chance viral replication. So in the refractory cases, you can go with the low dose of steroid, and even in the if a patient is having severe pain, then you can go with the hydroxychloroquine and sulfasalazine. Now, coming to the reactive arthritis is the oldest rheumatological manifestation which has been described in AIDS. It was first described by Winchester et al. Just after the 3 years of discovery of AIDS. Reactive arthritis is a seronegative peripheral arthritis, usually involving the lower extremities. It is accompanied with enthesitis, that is dactylitis. You can elicit your enthesitis at the point of insertion of tendon of Achilles. Then you can have plantar fasciitis. Patient can have mucocutaneous manifestation in the form of keratoderma blenioresicum and the circinate balanitis. I will show you the pictures in the next slide. Patient can have a psoriasiform lesion which can be easily confused with the psoriasis. Most of the non-HIV patients of the reactive arthritis have other extra articular manifestation in the form of urethritis and uveitis. Now, in HIV patient, urethritis incidence is as common in the non-HIV patients, but axial involvement and uveitis is lesser seen in the in the HIV patient. There is an antecedent history of genitourinary and GI infections, usually 2 weeks prior to the development of joint pain. Now in this picture, what you can see that the digits, then the third digit of your foot is being swollen and it is more of a sausage shape. The fourth one is the similar finding you get in the next toe also. So this is called dactylitis. It is very different from the arthritis in which you will get the swelling of joint rather than the whole of the digit will be swollen. So if whole of the digit is swollen, this is dactylitis. If you are getting swelling just around the joint, this is your PIP involvement in the form of in which you can see in your rheumatoid arthritis or HIV associated arthritis, polyarthritis type. Now polyarticular type. Now in this picture, what you can see that the patient is having lesion which is classically described as keratoderma blenioresicum. So this is usually confused with the pustular psoriasis. The patient will have a clear vesicle with erythematous basis and that will progress to macules, papules and nodules. Now in this picture, you can see the ulceration over the glans penis and the shaft of the penis. So this is the picture of a patient suffering from circinate balanitis. So this shows the importance of genital examination in a patient of reactive arthritis. Now, HLA association is very strong with the reactive arthritis. It has been seen that HLA is found in 80 to 90% of the patients having reactive arthritis, especially in the HIV patients. And this antigen has been shown to slow the progression of AIDS because of decreased presentation of P25 or 24 antigen. The treatment is similar to the HIV negative reactive arthritis. You have to start with the NSAID. If your patient is not responding to NSAID, you have to give sulfasalazine. Sulfasalazine, the main side effect of sulfasalazine is diarrhea. So you have to initiate at the lower doses. You have to start with the 500 milligram per day, twice a day, and then you have to increase it to the 2 grams per day. Hydroxychloroquine, you have to give in the dose of not more than 5 milligram per kg per day, and then you have to monitor the patient for arrhythmia and retinal toxicity if you are giving it for a longer period of time. For the skin lesion, you can go with the second generation retinoids. TNF alpha blockers, yes, you can give in the refractory reactive arthritis patient, but you have to be extremely cautious because if you are giving TNF blockers, your patient can be predisposed for the opportunistic infection. So CD4 count must be above 200 and your viral load should be suppressed. So coming to the other rheumatic manifestation, that is psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. Psoriasis can present with the skin lesion or joint involvement. The skin manifestations are usually severe and persistent. The subtypes of psoriatic skin lesion which you get in HIV is guttate, inverse, and endodermic type. The arthritis of psoriatic arthritis can be of 5 types. It has been classically divided into predominant DIP involvement, oligoarthritis, polyarthritis, polyarthritis, and arthritis retinitis. Types which you get in HIV is oligoarthritis and polyarthritis. DIP and axial involvement is less commonly seen in HIV patients. Onset is abrupt. It occurs, psoriatic arthritis usually occur in the late stages, and the treatment is similar as in non-HIV patient. You can go with the methotrexate and sulfasalazine. In the resistant cases, you can give even trileflunomide and anti-TNF agents. Rheumatological manifestation can be undifferentiated spondyloarthropathy. It is a subtype of spondyloarthropathy. Spondyloarthritis is divided into 5 subtypes. It can be either axial, it can be reactive, intraopathic if it is associated with the inflammatory bowel disease. It can be psoriatic if it is associated with psoriatic skin lesion or there is a fast tissue psoriatic lesion with the typical nail changes. Then you classify into psoriatic spondyloarthropathy. And if you can't classify these spondyloarthropathy in any of these groups, then it will be termed as undifferentiated arthritis. Now, the next one is avascular necrosis of bone. So, avascular necrosis of bone per se can be HIV related, or it has the incidence has increased with the introduction of uh, ART. The most common symptom is pain, and especially on the weight bearing joint. And usually, it may be asymptomatic, and you can detect it incidentally in the radiological study. So, the larger joints are usually involved, and the larger bones also. Now, coming to the HIV associated muscle disease. The most common is the myalgia and fibromyalgia. And almost one third of the HIV patients report myalgia, and 11% describe fibromyalgia. Mostly these patients are they have an associated depression, and you have to give a low dose of antidepressant, and it is usually self-limited. It, it can also be a manifestation of serious conversion. So only your symptomatic treatment is required. Now, the second one, muscle involvement in the HIV is HIV associated polymyositis. HIV associated polymyositis is typically seen in early infection as it usually presents as a subacute proximal muscle weakness with a raised serum creatinine creatinine phosphokinase level. This is a muscle enzyme which increases when there is a muscle destruction or muscle inflammation. You don't get much of myalgia and skin changes, which are typically seen in dermatomyositis. Dermatomyositis can also occur in the HIV associated myositis, but usually occurs in the later stage of HIV infection. Autoantibodies like anti-Jovan and anti-MI2 are typically absent in polymyositis, which is commonly seen with the dermatomyositis. AMG shows myopathic pattern, including fibrillatory waves, and you can have the complete interference pattern. Muscle biopsy is diagnostic. You will get the interstitial infiltrates with the degenerative and regenerative myofibrils. So you have to go for the muscle biopsy to make a diagnosis of polymyositis. You can take a help of MRI also. In MRI guided muscle biopsy is more healing as compared to the your blind muscle biopsy. Treatment is similar as in the case of non-inflammatory as compared to the other inflammatory myopathy. So you can go with the moderate dose of steroid. You can also try for the methotrexate and azathioprine. The treatment is of longer duration, so you have to monitor the patient for the opportunistic infections also, because these all the drugs decreases your immunity. HIV per se is a chronic infection, and these patients have an increased incidence of malignancy, malabsorption, and poor nutrition. These patients are weak and disabled, and they have a loss of lean body and muscle mass. A non-inflammatory necrotizing myopathy of unclear pathogenesis has been described in 42% of the patient. The diagnosis is biopsy based, and the treatment is similar as in the case of inflammatory myositis. You can give a trial of steroids. Now, ART related mitochondrial myopathy you can get, and the patient will have a reversible toxic mitochondrial myopathy, which is associated with a high dose of zidovudine. It usually manifests with myalgia, muscle tenderness, and proximal muscle weakness. It is reversible, and if you stop zidovudine for 6 weeks, it returns to the normal. So, if a patient comes with a myopathy and the patient is on zidovudine based regimen, then you have to stop the drug. If it is not recovering even after stopping the drug for 6 weeks, you should go for the muscle biopsy and EMG to look for the inflammatory myositis. You can even get ptosis and ophthalmoplegia with zidovudine and other NRTIs like diadenosine. Then the patient can have infusion body myositis. This is also an inflammatory myositis. Then patient can have rhabdomyolysis, that is muscle injury per se because of HIV infection or drug induced. The most common drugs which can cause rhabdomyolysis is diadenosine, lamivudine, raltegravir, ritonavir, indinavir, cotrimoxazole. You will suspect when the patient will have a raised CPK level with the proximal muscle weakness. And third is the at the end of the stage of AIDS, you can have rhabdomyolysis, which will not be which sometime can be associated and sometime it will not be associated with the opportunistic infection of the muscles. Now, the unique rheumatological manifestation which occurs in HIV is diffuse infiltrative lymphocytosis syndrome. It is exclusively seen in the HIV positive patient. The patient presents with the parotid gland enlargement, bilateral parotid gland enlargement with the Sicca symptoms. What are Sicca symptoms? The patient will have a dry eye and dry mouth. That is xerophthalmia and xerostomia. The patient will come with the frequent irritation of eyes, and the patient might have a eye infection because of frequent rubbing of eyes. There is increased frequency of lymphocytic interstitial pneumonitis. Patient can have lymphocytic hepatitis, aseptic lymphocytic meningitis, 7 cranial nerve involvement, and peripheral arthritis. Infiltration basically is of CD8 lymphocytes and macrophages. It is commonly it mimics your Sjogren syndrome, which occurs with a similar manifestation. You can have bilateral parotid gland involvement, extraarticular manifestation. But if you go for the biopsy, your salivary gland biopsy, the salidinitis which you get will be lesser as compared to the Sjogren syndrome. And these patients are typically anti-Ro antibody negative. The incidence of DILS has decreased with the introduction of ART. The treatment is just reassurance and observation in the mild cases. In, if a patient has a troublesome xerostomia, then you can go for the pilocarpine in the dose of 5 to 10 milligram twice a day. In xerophthalmia, if the patient is having dry eye, then you can go with the carboxymethylcellulose eye drops. And in the case of LIP, that is lymphocytic interstitial pneumonia, you have to give steroid. That is a high dose of steroid you need to give in the case of LIP. And yes, you have to start the patient on ART. Now, the vasculitis associated with HIV infection, you can have a primary vasculitis, you can have secondary vasculitis. A patient of HIV can present with TBM with tubercular vasculitis. So the prognosis is poorer in the patient as compared to a HIV patient with TBM. A wide spectrum of vasculitis you can see in HIV patient. The patient comes with fever, malaise, weakness, rash, headaches, and neurological symptoms. Triggers may be infectious, as it has been seen with cytomegalovirus and tuberculosis. Drugs and idiopathic conditions may result in vasculitis. Steroids are the mainstay of treatment. In refractory cases, you can go with the cyclophosphamide, IV immunoglobulin, and plasmapheresis also. If a patient comes with hematuria and hemoptysis and the patient is having a fever with malaise, you will think of granulomatosis with polyangiitis, that is Wegener. If a patient is a adult patient comes with asthma and there is an history of hematuria, then you will think of Churg-Strauss, that is eosinophilic granulomatosis. So these all are your vasculitis, but these are Wegener and Churg-Strauss are primary vasculitis. Infection-related vasculitis is secondary vasculitis. You can have vasculitis even in the case of RA and SLE also. Now coming to the rheumatoid arthritis is a symmetrical small joint polyarthritis of hands and feet, but larger joints can also be involved. The incidence of rheumatoid arthritis is less. The coexistence of HIV infection can develop before or after HIV infection, even independent of initiation of ART, because rheumatoid arthritis has been classically seen as a manifestation of iris because it is a CD4 mediated autoimmune response. So as CD4 levels are lower in the patients of HIV, so these patients are less predisposed to develop or to manifest the rheumatoid arthritis. Per se, HIV infection can lead to the false positive rheumatoid factor and anti-CCP2, but in a lower titer. So if you are having a high titer of rheumatoid factor and anti-CCP2 antibody, you should think of rheumatoid arthritis rather than HIV associated arthritis. In a previous studies done by Dutot et al., it was found that IgG, rheumatoid factor, and anti-CCP2 antibodies were positive as high as 47 and 15% respectively, but the titer was low. So the same thing which I was saying, that if a rheumatoid factor and anti-CCP2 factors are positive in a high titer, then you should think of rheumatoid arthritis. So this is a in this slide which you can see that this is a classical swelling of your proximal interphalangeal joint. So this is your a patient with the PIP involvement of your RA. In RA, the PIP involvement has occurred. Now, this is the classical deformities which you seen in the rheumatoid arthritis. This is a Bottinet deformity in which you can see the extension of DIP and flexion at PIP joint. And this is your swan neck deformity in which you have a flexion at DIP joint and extension at PIP joint. So if a patient comes with a polyarthritis, symmetrical onset with a these swan neck and Bottinet deformity, and you go for an RA factor level and the anti-CCP2 level, and they are positive in the high level titer, then you will think of rheumatoid arthritis. ESR may remain persistently raised despite good disease control. So in non-HIV patient, we monitor the disease activity with ESR and CRP, because in HIV, per se, HIV can cause increase ESR. So ESR may remain persistently raised in despite the disease control in a RA patient in HIV cases. Treatment includes hydroxychloroquine and sulfasalazine. In non-HIV patient, we start with the methotrexate, but as methotrexate is a immunosuppressive drug, so you will go with the hydroxychloroquine and sulfasalazine. The dosing will be similar as it was in the reactive arthritis. Then you can go with the corticosteroid, but will be an increased risk of osteonecrosis. More immune suppressing agents like methotrexate, leflunomide, and cyclosporin can be used, but the data are limited, so you have to screen the patient for the opportunistic infection before starting methotrexate, especially in the HIV patients. Among biologicals, the most common biological which have been used in the cases of HIV patient is TNF alpha inhibitors. But you have to before you have to assure that the HIV infection is well controlled and the CD4 count is more than 200. Now the other important rheumatological manifestation is systemic lupus erythematosus, that is SLE. The coexistent infection of HIV and SLE are unusual. Both the diseases are characterized by multi-system involvement with the immune dysfunction related to T lymphocyte cytokine production, alteration, and polyclonal activation of B lymphocyte. SLE may prevent HIV infection as a result of polyclonal antibody stimulation and treatment with antimalarial. SLE patients have raised interleukin 16 level, which inhibits HIV infection in vitro, representing a possible protective role against HIV in SLE patients. Likewise, SLE, as it is a CD4 mediated autoimmune response, SLE cannot develop in the setting of CD4 depleted condition like in HIV. So when we talk about SLE, the clinical features of SLE can be dermatological, constitutional, musculoskeletal, renal, or CNS, hematological, and immunological. So when dermatological manifestation can be alopecia, oral ulceration, facial rash. Constitutional symptoms constitute your fever and malaise. Patient can present with arthralgia, myalgia, arthritis, hematuria, proteinuria, seizure, psychosis, anemia. Leukopenia classically in SLE is a more of lymphopenia rather than neutropenia. The patient anemia can persist because of chronic disease or hemolytic anemia. SLE is a cause of secondary immune-mediated thrombocytopenia. So it is one of the cause for secondary ITP. If you go for the immunological markers, the gamma globulin level will be raised and the patient will have positive ANA, anti-dsDNA, anti-Smith antibody, and the complement levels will be low. So what we have seen that hypergammaglobulinemia can per se occur in HIV. Your ANA level can also be raised in HIV, but usually in low titers. So if you are suspecting SLE, you should go for the anti-dsDNA level and anti-Smith antibody level, and low complement level are usually not seen with HIV. So if a patient with a similar manifestation, similar clinical features comes with a low complement level, it is SLE rather than your HIV related manifestation, because most of the manifestation of this condition which you can see is of similar to your HIV patients. Now, this is a picture in which you can classically see the malar rash of the SLE, which has spared your nasolabial fold. Now, the rash, this type of rash you can get in dermatomyositis also. What is dermatomyositis? It was a inflammatory myositis. So, in that group of patient, the patient has a muscular proximal muscle weakness. So, they can also have a this type of skin changes, but in the dermatomyositis, there will be involvement of your nasolabial fold, which is classically spared in the malar rash of a SLE. This picture shows the oral ulceration which you can get in the SLE patients. So as we have seen that the most of the clinical features of HIV can be confused with the per se HIV infection, and if a patient has a low complement level, then it is SLE rather than your HIV related manifestation. Treatment, if you discuss the treatment is of choice is hydroxychloroquine that we give in the non-HIV patient also, because it is efficacious drug and the anti-inflammatory effect does not appear to be associated with increased risk of opportunistic infection in HIV patient. SCQS is the only drug which decreases the mortality in the SLE patient, and it has to be started in each and every patient of SLE. Low dose of steroid may be used in the caution in a patient if uh, SLE is causing life-threatening manifestation. You can even go for the higher immunosuppression in the form of mycophenolate and your cyclophosphamide, because SLE patient can die of development of lupus nephritis, that is the renal involvement, myocarditis, and CNS vasculitis. So in these cases, you have to give higher immunosuppression in the form of mycophenolate and cyclophosphamide. So you have to individualize your treatment in the cases of SLE with HIV, because risk and benefit you have to compare it before starting any of these drug. But irrespective of HIV, you have to start with the hydroxychloroquine in each and every patient of SLE, because SCQS has shown to decrease the viral replication also. Early reports suggested that rheumatoid arthritis went into the remission and the activity of SLE reduced in the face of HIV infection, as discussed earlier, because the CD4 count, these two diseases are CD4 mediated, and usually in the HIV patients you have a low CD4 count, but when iris develops, these diseases can again manifest. Now the ART related rheumatological manifestation can be either myopathy, which is usually seen in zidovudine. We no more use stavudine. Osteonecrosis, parotid lipomatosis with protease inhibitors. You can see with lopinavir, etazanavir. Tenofovir can cause decreased bone mineral density, and your patient can develop osteoporosis. Then you can have indenavir, that is protease inhibitor related adhesive capsulitis, Dupuytren's contracture, tenosynovitis, temporomandibular joint dysfunction, and AVN, that is avascular necrosis. So to conclude, rheumatologists and physician dealing with HIV patient need to be aware of wide spectrum of rheumatic diseases associated with HIV infection, with the introduction of ARTs, the natural history of HIV infection has changed. Now, the patients are surviving longer, and now they are predisposed for the other diseases like musculoskeletal disorders. Some symptoms of rheumatological manifestation are per se because of direct toxicity of HIV virus, and some are because of immune reconstitution. If a patient of HIV comes with the musculoskeletal symptoms like myopathy, proximal muscle weakness, you have to take a drug history because might be a case of zidovudine induced myopathy. The pain can be per se because of AVN, that is avascular necrosis. Then if you have stopped the ARTs and even after withdrawal of the suspected drug, if a patient is having persistent muscle weakness, then it can be per se as a HIV associated myopathy, which is usually non-tender. Now, if the antibodies are positive and in the muscle biopsy, if you are getting the changes which are peculiar of polymyositis and dermatomyositis, it is polymyositis and dermatomyositis rather than HIV associated myopathy. A joint disease, a joint pain may be non-inflammatory or inflammatory. When if it is associated with synovitis, it is inflammatory. So you will think of rheumatoid arthritis. If it is lasting less than 24 hours, you have to think of painful articular syndrome. If it is lasting less than 6 weeks, you can think of, and it is not associated with synovitis, it is HIV associated arthralgia. If it is associated with synovitis, but there are no erosions, then it is HIV associated arthritis. And if you are getting erosions with the rheumatoid factor positivity and your HLA-B27 positivity, it can be either reactive arthritis or it can be rheumatoid arthritis, or in oligoarthritis or polyarthritis, you can even think of psoriatic arthritis. Further laboratory investigation should be sent to come to a proper diagnosis. With the longer survival and the newer refinements in the treatment, the spectrum is likely to continue to evolve. So, thank you. This is all from my side. Uh, if anyone want to ask any question.
Participants can unmute themselves or they can chat, type in the chat box if they have any questions.
If anyone is having any queries, please unmute their microphone. You can ask your questions. You can also type your questions in the chat box.
I don't think we have any questions, ma'am.
Okay. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I think we can end the session now.